Matt, how did you find carnivore?
Well, it's an interesting story, Dave. Um, we can go back 20 years, and I was living in Calgary, Alberta. I got a phone call one day, and the guy said, "Hey, how'd you like to come work in Bermuda?" I said, "Sure." And at that point in time, the whole process started, and I realized, yeah, I don't want to go to Bermuda this heavy. And got on Atkins. So I discovered Atkins back in the day, and this is 2006. So actually, it was fall 2005. I apologize. And I went and lost 50 pounds in 6 months on Atkins. And I was, smart ass kind of guy. And I stayed in stage one Atkins, which at the end of the day is carnivore. So I had a little experience with carnivore 20 years ago, and it worked really, really well for me. So I then, July 2006, ended up in Bermuda and promptly took 20 years to put back on the 50 pounds I lost, plus another 30 pounds. So at my heaviest in Bermuda, I was 280 pounds. And it's pretty hot here and humid. And being 280 pounds in Bermuda is not pleasant, So the reason I ended up that heavy was I had a bunch of physical issues along the way. And in 2022, I had a double knee replacement. And that in itself was not a whole lot of fun. And at that point in time, I had dropped a few pounds for that. And I was down to about 250 pounds when I had the double knee replacement and then added 30 pounds post op. So, as you can imagine, having both knees replaced at the same time, you're not getting a whole lot of motion and not a whole lot of movement or exercise. And life was not fun for a little while. So I got through the knee replacement and got to a point where I could recover my what used to be heavy physical activity. And during that next year, after it's about 3 months after your knee replacement that you can start getting fairly active again. So I did, and doing my thing, working, a little bit of exercise, and my hip went. So now I need a hip replacement. So we're a year and a half now after the knee replacements, and now I'm scheduled for a hip replacement. Um, so I went and had a hip replacement, and this would be mid 2024 now, and going hard through the physio. The hip replacement was successful, and going hard through physio, and the bone broke after 6 months. So I went in for 6 months, a 6 month physical and checkup on the hip, and got the green light, and I'll go ahead, have at her. You can do whatever you want now. Awesome. So 2 days later, my legs started to hurt. 3 days later, I couldn't walk properly. 4 days later, I was calling an ambulance. So when I went in, when they took me into the hospital, they tossed me straight into X-ray, and there's a lovely image of a bone, the broken bone, and the pin that was in my leg was shooting out at a 90-degree angle. So during that recovery, because they went in through the same scars, and I was still 250 some odd pounds. The scar was brutal. The recovery was twice as long. And that was, like I said, that was July 2024, the second hip replacement. This time they had to do a full replacement. So when they did the full replacement, that really set me back, and the recovery for that was quite brutal. And it's still, to this day, not 100%. I still have some issues with it. I still get some pain. I still have some clunking and some issues that I shouldn't have. But so that gets us to present day. Now, I'm one of those kind of guys that I work hard and I play hard. And I played hard for a lot of years. I'm 60 years old, so I played pretty hard. And it caught up with me. So September 2025, it was mid-September 2025. I had just gotten out of the shower, and I'm considering myself at that point in time recovered from the hip replacement. And all of a sudden, my arm wasn't working properly. And I looked in the mirror, and half my face was frozen. I had a stroke, and I was home alone. And it was difficult, a very, very difficult time. So I called the ambulance. I had to scream at them. I couldn't talk properly, couldn't communicate. So it took me probably 5 minutes of pleading and yelling and making really stupid sounds, I would think, from the other end of the phone, to get an ambulance. So the ambulance finally got shipped out. I managed to get my address across to them. And I had to, I live up on a hill, and I live in a multiplex, and there's 13 steps down to the road and then down to the bottom of the hill. So I had to walk down those stairs in the middle of a stroke and then get down to the bottom of the hill because the ambulance was lost. So long story short for that part of it anyway, toss me into the ambulance. I get across what my issue is, and they tootle me off to the hospital. So get into the hospital. They figure out, oh, he's had a stroke. And they start putting me in for images and blood work and this and that. And meanwhile, we're having a discussion. Well, they're talking to me. I'm grunting back at them. And they really are having a hard time figuring out what the cause of the stroke is. So that goes on. They finally get me admitted that night. So I'm now in a room, and I've had a bunch of imaging done, a couple of different ways, and the doctors come in, and it was a couple of doctors, and one of them was a neurologist, and he started saying, "Mr. Walker, we've had a look at your pictures, and you've had a stroke." And I'm sort of nodding, yeah, thanks. But it's not your first. You've had 4 strokes recently. So my eyes sort of got big, and I got really, really concerned at that point in time. And they started talking to me, and they started telling me about what they're going to do and how they're going to treat me and all that good stuff. And the neurologist, he goes, I'm to be honest, I'm surprised you're able to communicate at all with me after having 4 strokes. I've seen it before, though. We call it tough guy syndrome because you've experienced these symptoms, haven't you? And I thought about it, and it's like, yeah. I can think back to some things that happened and go, yeah, that explains why I was feeling that way. So I nodded, and he goes, yeah, that's tough guy syndrome. You were too stupid to go to a doctor, weren't you? You would have just died if you weren't lucky enough to get to a phone today. So that was my wake-up call. Now, interestingly enough, when I was in the hospital and I was recovering, obviously the hospital food is crap, just horrible, horrible food. And I was already dieting, and I'll backtrack after I get past this. Food was terrible, so I had people bringing me in food. My wife brought me in some food, and My business partner was rather concerned, so he brought in like 5 pounds of fruit, different types of fruit. Eat your fruit, eat the fruit, just eat the fruit, no matter what. Eat the fruit. Okay, got it. Um, and so I was eating full carbs while in the hospital, even though at that point in time I was on a low carb diet. And again, I'll backtrack to that. So they're bringing me in food. I'm eating a high carb diet. I've been put on a max dosage of a statin and blood thinners, plus a few other little odds and ends that they were pumping into me at the time. And things started going downhill. I was having a real hard time mentally. I was having a real hard time putting my sentences and my words together, and some memory gaps and this, that, and the other thing. And as it turns out, that was a damn statin, wasn't it? So when I got out of the hospital, I was in the hospital for 5 days, and I got out of the hospital. And at that point in time, I'm on a mission. The mission is um, you're going to lose some weight, right? So the last thing that happened before I left the hospital, there was a specialist in from the States, a cardiologist. So the doctors that were taking care of me got this guy and had a little chat with him and said, "Hey, can you take a look?" And they explained the whole thing, and he goes, "We'll just do a bubble study." And off I went down to ultrasound, and they did this bubble study, and lo and behold, I have a hole in my heart. It just got better and better and better, and it's the reason for the strokes, right? It's called a PFO, which is a patent foramen ovale, and what I needed was a PFO closure. So awesome. We now know the cause, right? So we know what the cause for the strokes are. Good stuff. So they send me home and they say, okay, we're going to make arrangements, blah, blah, blah. So I get home and I start going online and I start looking up, okay, what's going to happen here? What's the next step? Because they didn't really tell me anything about the procedure, about what was coming, about post stroke recovery, going into a PFO closure, that sort of thing. So I had to do all that research. And at the same time, I had a buddy of mine who, for years, and that's another story, was trying to get me to go keto / carnivore. And this is a lifelong buddy who lost his wife 5-6 years ago, and was on a mission himself to go through the same thing. So he's on me after my knee replacements and my hip replacements, getting me to think about keto and carnivore. So I started researching carnivore, and I found all of the top guys: Sean Baker, Anthony Chafee, Tony Hampton, Eric Westman, Dr. Siwas, Dr. Oveda, Dr. Ekberg, Dr. Kiltz, Ken Berry. Man, I watched him every day. And then I found you, and I started watching your show, and the interviews made a big difference for me. So I got on a mission, and I lost 50 pounds in 4.5 months. So my current weight is 205 pounds. And when I hopped on to the full carnivore, I was 260. So I've been a strict carnivore with a couple of celebrations and a couple of experiments. The experiments, they didn't really work all that well. The celebrations, well, you pay for play on the carnivore diet. So I played and I had to pay. There were some celebrations, a little bit of Christmas stuff. I was at the 45 pound mark for loss. It's like, yeah, I can afford a drink, or I can afford a, a bit of your Christmas dinner, and off we go. So um, that's sort of how we've got to where I'm at right now. And that's I'm hardcore carnivore still, and I'm not changing. I'm never going back. Once I learned about the lies, the from big food and big pharma, once I learned about how badly they've manipulated the food that we all eat, once I learned about or seeing the graphs of when all of the major diseases took off, which would be, mid 70s after the big studies that villainized meat and saturated fat. All you got to do is look at the evidence. And because of that, I'll never go back. Never go back.
Yeah. Wow. What a story. And so, um, how, besides the weight loss, have you noticed anything else happening in the last, say, 5 months? Like, for example, is your hip any less painful? Any change with your knees or anything like that?
Well, yeah, I've got a shopping list of things that have gotten better. Right off the top of my head, my vision is improving. I can now drive at night. I was having difficulty driving at night, and now no issues. All my skin issues, I had stuff under the hairline and my scalp, and I had skin issues starting. They're all gone. All of them are gone. I've had other inflammation for other joints. I do tend to lean to the arthritic side, and my joints in my hands, my knuckles, they're starting to deform, and it's part of age and part of beating the crap out of my hands, um, due to work and that sort of thing. But all of that is gone. So all of the inflammation in my joints is gone. My other hip, the only remaining joint in my lower body that's mine, doesn't hurt anymore, which is awesome because now I the last thing I ever want to do is have another hip replacement. Very last thing I ever want to do. So um, yeah, and there's just what else? My snoring is better. My sleep is better. My energy levels are better. Everything is better. I haven't felt this good since I was a teenager.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I've discovered a lot of things. And, in a way, this is a cautionary tale for anybody who's 30 years old who sees this, to say, hey, your body will take it. Your body will take it for a long time. And then it's going to say, yeah, we're not taking it anymore. So, if there's anything I could tell somebody who's 30 years old, it's cut out the crap, eat real food, just eat real food, and you'll be good. You'll be okay. Go, you won't go through what I went through.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that's sadly, I think most of us kind of go through that where it's like you're in your 20s or 30s and you're invincible, right? You
Yep.
just you go out for a night drinking, and then the next day the recovery from a hangover is just drink a can of Coke, eat some pizza, and then you're good to go for the rest of the day. And it's like that's great at the time, but there's long-term consequences.
Yeah. Bermuda's an interesting place, and it's been called 60,000 alcoholics clinging to a rock in the middle of the Atlantic. And I took part in that lifestyle when I first came to the island, and I've not been partaking in that lifestyle for about 5-6 years now, or actually just before COVID hit. So call it 2019. I sort of give up that lifestyle. But man, it's hard when everybody does it. Everybody. You don't have a choice. You go out and socialize. You go to somebody's house. Would you like something to drink? Hey, we got some food going too. Oh, have another drink. Here, have a beer. have a rum, whatever it is, and it's just non-stop. You walk into a bar, it's like walking into Cheers. Hey, and the bartender's already pouring your drink because he knows you, you know? I did that for 15 years, and it was really, really easy to put on 80 pounds.
Right. Is that kind of like almost like an expats kind of thing?
No, it's locals too.
Ah, okay.
There's a huge diabetes problem here. Huge diabetes problem. I'd love to find a way to spread the message here without um no, without being that guy, you know. And it's difficult here. People don't really care. I really believe people don't care, and I didn't. I'm honest. I didn't care my first 10, 15 years here, and then I realized, yeah, you're starting to let yourself go. You need to deal with this, you know. So I had enough discipline to understand that it had to change, but man, there's folks here that are losing limbs, and there's dialysis. There's more dialysis parking at the hospital parking lot than there is regular parking.
Really?
Yeah, it's
Oh.
it's crazy. It's crazy here.
Mm. Wow. So, I mean, it's it must feel good that you've kind of extricated yourself from that, right? So there's this kind of warm social component to it, but when you've been out of that scene for a long time, certainly for me anyway, I look back on it and think, how was I ever doing that so much? And I kind of I look at it like I had all these good memories of those moments, and then when I look at it more critically, I think, "Well, no, I didn't. I don't remember anything."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I remember the hangover. I remember the pain that I suffered. I remember the loss of money. It's really expensive here too to do that and live that way. It's pretty pricey.
Right.
So, I've because of being in Bermuda, there's a lot of well-to-do folks, and if we're to go out for dinner with friends or whatnot, we're not going to we're not going to a cheap restaurant. There are no cheap restaurants here, so typically it's 4-star, 5-star dining, that type of dining with our friends. And man, you rack up some huge bills at those types of dinner. But worse than that, it's the food. The food's delicious. There's some awesome chefs on the island. So you're eating massive quantities of calories and carbs at these meals, and 3, 4 bottles of wine, whatever it is. I have some friends who like their wine, so the wine gets ordered and it gets consumed, and you pay the price for that. I don't do that anymore. I don't miss it one little bit. We had a little Christmas luncheon for my company, and basically every year we just go for lunch. I bring all the boys to lunch and buy lunch just before Christmas. And this time I was on carnivore, so my meal was 2 burger patties with bacon and cheese on top of it. That's it. And everybody's sort of looking down the table. I'm sitting at the end of the table, and they're looking down the table going, "What are you doing? What are you eating? Why are you doing that?" So I had to start explaining what I was doing. I had to start explaining carnivore, um, which got a lot of really strange looks. My doctor, my GP, when I already knew what she was going to say about going on carnivore, so I didn't tell her. And I was in the middle of my weight loss plan and I still had high-ish blood pressure. Now that they've changed the rules for when they want to start giving you drugs, they've lowered those limits. She wanted to put me on blood pressure medication, and it's like, yeah, no. You saw what my BP was the last time I was in here. You saw my weight the last time I was in here. It's all in a downward arrow. No, I'm not taking the drugs. Just trust that I will get where I need to be by losing the weight and get my blood pressure where it needs to be. So I did. I went back to see her again, and all of a sudden, I didn't need blood pressure meds. And when I was on the slab, when they sent me away for the PFO closure, I was awake right until they put me to light sleep. And my BP at that point in time, while I was lying on the table, was 120 over 70. So I was in the 190 over 90, or sorry, how was it? 130 over 90 is where I was previously, and that's where they wanted to put me on blood pressure meds. And it's like, yeah, no, that's not happening.
Right. So, just on your heart, through the surgery, that's completely resolved now?
Yeah, I got back a couple of weeks ago. So that in itself is a that's a whole separate thing, a whole story
So
there.
so sorry, that's only a couple of weeks ago that that was done?
Yeah, yeah, it was 2 weeks ago yesterday. So I
Wow.
flew out. I left Bermuda on a Tuesday. Went in for the procedures. I had two procedures done, and then they released me that same day. It was done as outpatient, and I flew home on the Thursday. So my wife was freaked out because she didn't think I should be flying that close to a heart surgery. But again, I did the research and I asked the doctors, and everybody was aware that I was going to fly. And as it turns out, because you're pumped full of blood thinners, it's the best time to travel because then you don't have to worry about clots or anything for like deep strombo. What is it?
Deep vein thrombosis.
You don't have to worry about any of that good stuff because of all the blood thinners, et cetera, et cetera. So it worked out okay. The one for the first time in my life, though, they pushed me from the gate, from check-in all the way to the gate in wheelchair. They would not allow me to walk that distance. So that was my single concession.
Yeah, I've had that experience as well. Been wheeled all the way through the airport right up to getting on the plane, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so at this stage, how are you eating day to day?
I'm typically 2 meals a day. All my first meal is typically noon, and I'll have a strip loin steak is my preference for lunch. Just about a 12-ounce strip loin steak and 5 eggs. That'll be my lunch. And if I'm still hungry, I'll have a strip loin or a ribeye for dinner. I'll mix up my proteins occasionally. I'll toss in some pork and some lamb, um, just to get a change, you know. And occasionally I'll make a meatloaf with various proteins in it. And my favorite is beef ribs. You can overeat on carnivore.
Yeah. And so what does your wife feel about this? You know, she was worried about you flying after the surgery. Is she a little also paranoid about the way you're eating?
So when I told her 5 months ago what I was going to do and how I was going to change my diet and how the grocery shopping had to change, she thought I was insane. She literally thought I was nuts and I'd lost it. And there's you don't need to lose weight this fast. You don't need to do this. It's crazy. Don't do that. You're gonna drop dead. Because at that point in time, I'm not taking the statin, and everybody's saying he'll die. He'll die if he doesn't take the statin. And on top of all the saturated fat and the eggs and the butter and everything else, she thought I was absolutely nuts. Then she saw me, and watched my journey and realized, holy crap, he's getting better. He doesn't hurt. His skin's cleared up. My varicose veins are fading in my legs, which is awesome because that was something that she noticed, right? That all of these things are just clearing up. My skin feels better. Everything feels better. She saw the change in my personality. I was easily irritated. I have zero patience for stupidity, and there's a lot of stupidity in this world. So I'm very easy and quick. I was very easy and quick to snap, and no more. I'm now just a nice level playing field. I'm just. It takes a lot to put me over the edge into anger, right? So now I'm much more on an even keel. My employees appreciate that. I'll tell you that, and so does my wife, because I'm not flipping out for things that I shouldn't be flipping out over anymore.
It's interesting you say that. When I look back to my kind of pre-carnivore days, I would kind of say, like, the best way to describe it is I didn't tolerate fools lightly, kind of thing. And since being carnivore, it feels like you have this calm, and it's like, oh, well, if they want to be fools, who cares? They're not impacting me.
Yeah, and I've people have asked me what's changed, and I've explained what I've done. Right. So when people ask, I'll share. Um, you can see people roll their eyes and oh yeah, what are these? And when I get that kind of response, I just sort of back right off. But if people are seriously interested, I share the information. I send links. I send your website in particular because your channel is so important because you're getting the story out and it's believable. The real people, the real stories, and people aren't perfect. A lot of the people that you interview are they're still partway through their journey. They're partway through. They haven't succeeded with their weight loss. They've had issues. They've had setbacks. They've had stalls. They've had everything, and they're honest. So to me, it was huge watching what you do in the interviews and the stories that come on your channel. It's helped me in a big way.
Oh, that's awesome feedback. Thank you very much. Yeah, I've had the interesting thing is, the I've had some vegans occasionally comment on videos, like, and say the opposite, like, oh, you're saying this carnivore thing works? Well, where's their muscles? Where's this? Where's that? And it's like, I think you're missing the point.
Yeah.
This is everything's relative. It's not like we're not 20 years old only eating carrots and going to the gym 8 hours a day. But yeah. um
It's funny because my wife is like, well, when are you going to stop? I'm not. I'm not going to stop. And she was after Christmas decided, okay, I think I'd like to try carnivore now. So awesome. The problem with that is she doesn't eat meat, right? So when I say she doesn't eat red meat, she eats fish, she eats chicken, she eats protein, she eats animal protein, just not beef. So she sees me putting back beef and eggs like they're going out of style, and she's still going, I can't do that. I just can't do that. I said, okay, well, we have a plan, and you just start eliminating foods, start eliminating any sugar, start eliminating anything that has more than three ingredients, eliminate anything that you can't pronounce, and just start eating real food. So she's at this point in time, I'm going to say not quite ketovore, but she's definitely keto.
so based on the experience you've had, if someone came to you and said, okay, Matt, I'm a bit sick of the partying every day, and I want to get a bit healthier. I'm willing to give this carnivore thing a try for 90 days. Would you advise them to kind of rip the Band-Aid off and jump in, or maybe go slowly in through low carb and then keto?
I would have to judge that based on the personality. If it's people that I know, I'd be able to make that decision. I'm a rip the Band-Aid off kind of guy, and that's the way I hopped into it. I didn't bother slowing down. I didn't bother. I put up with the gastric distress and the bathroom fun that everybody enjoys when you do that. And my wife, on the other hand, I wasn't going to allow her to go through that. And it's even if you want to go carnivore, you're starting keto. So I knew with my wife that it had to be a certain way. I've got one of my vendors in the States. I believe he's 85 this year, and he still goes to work every day. He works 6 days a week. And he heard about my issues, and because I was ill, I was in the hospital. He took considers me part of the family, and I explained what was going on, and I explained what I was doing, which was at that point in time when I had this conversation with this guy. My goal was to reduce any possible risk for the upcoming surgeries that I was looking at, right? So I was in risk reduction and reduce all my markers and get them down to where they need to be, make sure my ketones are up. So I'm going to recover. But he, at 85 years old, said, well, crap, if that's working for you, I'm going to try it. So I got an 85-year-old man who's in Florida, who's got a family who love their steaks. They love their steaks, but they love their pies and their desserts, and they're all overweight and they're all unhealthy. And he said that. And he goes, one of my sons is shaped like a balloon, and he gave me some information back, and it's like I'm going to try this. He's been continuing for I think he's a month and a half in now in carnivore at 85 years old, and he's getting positive results. You know, so
That's awesome.
it's amazing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Um, so Matt, if people want to reach out to you, do you have any way of getting in contact? Any social media?
No, I've sort of stayed away from social media other than watching, just because of the brain rot that you get from social media. I really dislike it. YouTube, on the other hand, is the only way that I'll get involved, and typically it's reading as opposed to posting. I don't post very often at all. I've thought about doing something. What I'll do is I'll kick you out a Gmail address, that if anybody should want to talk to me for any reason, or if there's anybody in from Bermuda watching this and want to do something, be more than happy to get on board.
Yeah, no problem. I'll include that in the show notes. Matt, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I really appreciate your time.
It's been a pleasure. I'm glad I can contribute.